So my name's Jaan Madan. I'm from an organisation called Mental Health First Aid England, and I'm very honoured to have been asked today to chair this panel discussion with three fantastic and very interesting members who I'll introduce in a few moments. The first thing is, a lot of you seem very far away. You may have been asked to do this already, but can I encourage you, invite you, smile at you inanely until you start to move? But anyone who sat at the back, would you please like to come forward? It would be great to kind of see you as part of the conversation and the discussion as well, but also so we feel like we're one big group that's all in this conversation together. I'll carry on talking while you move. Thank you. So just thinking back to Barbara from Accenture this morning, who was talking about some of the research from their recent poll. And she was saying about how half the workers were concerned or worried about disclosing some kind of mental ill health issue because of the negative impact that might have on their careers. She also reminded us about the Thriving at Work report, and 4 in 10 organisations at the moment, so less than half of our organisations and businesses, feeling capable and able to respond to an employee, one of their population's workplace mental ill health. And then lastly, she drew to our attention and reminded us around actually really what we're talking about is 1 in 1, or the 9 in 10 of UK employees that are experiencing or will experience some kind of mental ill health. And then I was thinking earlier back to my early career, and when I was a young person going out into the workplace and actually having lived experience or personal experience of depression and anxiety, and how even though I had some fantastic and some quite poor, but most part fantastic line managers, it was their lack of knowledge or awareness or understanding, or fear, I'm not sure, and I'd like to go back and actually check in, although that's not possible. But I didn't have those conversations, and no one brought them up with me. And from my perspective, that had a significant impact, negative impact, on the beginning of my career. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to some very interesting people that are going to have in conversation with us for the next 25 minutes. So we'll start in the middle here. So we've got Neil Longden from the Environment Agency, who's also has been nominated by his employees as a Mind Index exemplary line manager as well. The Environment Agency have been a Mind Index top performing business for the last 2 years. We've got Jessica from KPMG with us as well. They're rolling out a significant program about mental health and well-being, and mental health being a core part of that well-being strategy as well. Also a Mind employee champion. And we've got Alison Garbutt from WHSmith, who's spearheaded and driven a campaign around changing the culture of a well-known organisation on our high street. Forgive me, I don't think you've recently been awarded like our other 2 guests here, but someone who I know is very passionate and very driven within the space as well. So can we just take a moment to welcome our panel today, please? Okay, so just to remind you all as well, we're going to have a bit of a conversation up here. Hopefully it'll be a conversation that you find interesting and enlightening. Please do keep on asking questions through Slido. We'll make sure there's some time at the end of this conversation to bring those questions up as well. And I'm sure all the members of the panel here and myself would be very happy to talk to you afterwards as well. So I'm going to start off with just asking you all why mental health workplace well-being. So what was the drivers that got you interested in that? I was just saying a little bit about me as a young person going into the workplace. Actually, I found that quite challenging, and that was certainly one of the drivers that pushed me. But Jessica, if I start with you, just for a few moments, can you set the scene for us all as to why this is such an important agenda for you, please?
Well, I've had mental health issues pretty much all my life, and coming into the workplace, I often feel quite intimidated by new experiences in the workplace, and I don't know whether I'll be supported to disclose mental illness relating to me there. So at KPMG, when I joined, I was supported, but I did become ill at one point and I needed to ask for help. I was very fortunate to be supported, and but I wanted to help other people. I wanted to make sure that we had measures in place, so I joined our employee network, I now chair that, and we've come a really long way in the way that we support people. But for me, it's absolutely vital that we have mental health and physical health treated the same, and that we support colleagues. I still have mental illness today, and it's still just as important to me. So it's something that's very personal to me, and I think it's absolutely vital.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Neil, same question to you.
Well, I think I've probably been quite privileged or lucky. I've had the reverse experience from yourself, where I've had really supportive line managers who have set the direction, been great role models in terms of putting people first, and that's empowered me to learn, to explore, and how best to support people. So I'm very keen on ensuring that people are the best they can be at work, and I want to support them to get there. So that chimes with my values, and that's what I focus on at work.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And finally, Alison.
So my experience is as a line manager, coming up for 6 years ago, I was managing a project, and one of the project managers working with me took his own life, and I was truly horrified at not only my own ignorance about what he'd been going through and how to deal with what had happened, but also when I spoke to my line manager and other kind of senior people in the business. As a business, we realised that we just didn't have the right knowledge and understanding to deal with that situation. So that's what has driven me since that time.
Right, okay, thank you. So I'm just wondering, and I'm not going to come out and ask any of you, but I'm just wondering, does any of that resonate for any of you at all? Either personal experience of ourselves or someone that we cared about or a colleague, this sudden realisation that maybe our business isn't able to respond, doesn't know how to ask the right questions, or actually that we've had some really positive experiences ourselves and we have a genuine value and a belief that people should thrive and have the potential to do that. So, which is a lovely segue into our first question, Jessica. So, thinking about the work that you're doing at KPMG, you're rolling out a major piece of wellbeing strategy there. Mental health is a core component of that. Can you share with us for a few moments as to some of the data, so some of the thinking behind that strategy that you're implementing, and really why line managers are such a core component of that?
Yes. Well, we've got a really comprehensive wellbeing offering at KPMG for all our people. We have many different people working in many different roles and working in many different scenarios, which is why the wellbeing that we provide for everyone has to be quite diverse for people who are working remotely, working families, help us with our finances, etc., etc. But the board at KPMG were really keen to make sure that it was comprehensive and was 21st century fit. So they asked us, and they asked me to help with the mental health element, to look at all sorts of different data about what people were absent for, what people were keen to get training on, why people felt that perhaps they didn't have the right knowledge or the right skills being taught to them as line managers. And of course, everyone has a line manager at KPMG. Yep. I'm a line manager and I have a line manager. So everybody needs to have that support. And often, even though we have leaders, and leaders walking the walk and talking the talk is something that I've heard about this morning and I think is crucial, often the first person that you go to when you need some support is your line manager. So looking at what line managers felt they needed support with to be effective relating to mental health was something that was absolutely critical to look at. So over the last couple of years, we've been asking our line managers, where do you see those knowledge gaps? What do you want as far as your training goes? And we were able to give the board some comprehensive qualitative data and quantitative data as to where their skill gaps were, and then actually some commentary behind that. This is why I need these skills to be taught to me. This is why I want that. And we've been able then to translate that into some core actions around training and around role models that will help those line managers to actually perform their roles more effectively, and to be honest, to use things that they already had, like professional skills, but to use them to support people's mental health much more effectively and confidently.
Brilliant, okay, so thank you. So data, confidence, utilising the skills you've already got and picking up on the new skills that we need to develop. Which leads us into the really very innovative and groundbreaking work that you're doing at WHSmith and have been doing for some time. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about that? And again, you've had a real focus on line managers. Maybe give us an update actually as to the programme as well, and what you've achieved so far, Alison.
So following on from the experience that I spoke about in the introduction, I took a while. I didn't get myself organised straight away, but I knocked on a few different doors to try and get some senior buy-in, because I think, as other people have said earlier today, that is so critical. And the door that I knocked on that really got the result was our chief exec's door. And I went to him initially not with a line manager plan, with a plan to match the number of mental and physical health first aiders. And I don't think he's ever done this before. He actually told me to go away and come back with a bigger plan. And that bigger plan, working with mental health first aid, because you remember I was coming from a position of ignorance, so I worked with an external expert body. I came up with a plan. My massive plan I knew wouldn't get signed off was to train everyone. And my medium-sized plan, but that is still really meaty for a cost-conscious business like ours, was to train all line managers to be mental health aware, as well as holding on to the plan of matching the number of mental and physical health first aiders. The exciting thing is that we're now 90% trained, so we're getting close to the 1 in 10 in our organisation being at least mental health aware. We've matched the number of mental and physical health first aiders. And excuse me looking at my notes, but I've got some stats that have just come out in the last few weeks that I'm really excited about. We have an employee engagement survey. I'm just thinking I've seen people are interested in smaller organisations. This doesn't have to be a big survey. It could be SurveyMonkey. It could just be asking questions. We lifted the questions from the MHFA site because we're not the experts to come up with the questions. And I'll just highlight the two that relate to line managers. So the question, I feel comfortable speaking with my line manager about mental health if it is impacting my work. Credit Mental Health First Aid for coming up with that question. 3/4 of our staff now say that they're confident, which, looking at Barbara's data earlier, I'm really excited that we are seeing that shift. And the other one is for line managers to see whether they would feel confident to support a member of their team who may be struggling with their mental health. And over 80% have said they're now confident.
Fantastic.
So some exciting progress, I hope.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. So we've talked about an organisation, a whole organisational change programme that you're going through. And I know we'll get back to that culture development piece later. And Jessica, you were talking about the skills that maybe we already have, but we just need that awareness to understand them, or some skills development as well. So Neil, coming on to you, I mean, clearly what you're doing as a line manager and for your direct reports is working really well. You were nominated for the reward, and I'm very glad to hear that you achieved that as well. But actually, how much do you think of good line management, particularly around workplace wellbeing and mental health, is intuitive, is instinctive, do you think? And how much of this is about skills development and needing to parachute in development programs for people?
Okay, well, I mean, the first thing I'd just like to say is that it was really overwhelming, really humbling, actually, to receive the award, for someone taking the time out to explain to complete strangers what they'd been through and how I'd supported them. I hadn't realised I'd had such an impact on this particular individual in terms of what I was doing. So the question around intuition or support, I think probably when I first thought about it, I probably thought it was probably all intuitive.
Yep.
You know, my personality type is one of a support and nurturing approach to leading people. But as I've reflected on it, whether there's osmosis or whether it's just that my desire to learn and understand more has helped me. So when I talked about fantastic role models that I've had in the past in terms of line managers, I've taken what they've done by putting people first, by thinking about people as individuals, not just for the 8 hours that they come to work, but for the whole 24 hours a day, the whole package. That's enabled me to grow. The organisation has helped with various different training courses that I've been aware of, but probably the one that I got most value from was around emotional intelligence. So knowing myself helped me to know others better. So thinking about that has helped me focus on people more and more over my career. So that's been a really important step for me. So I think there's a balance between intuition, where for people it does come naturally, but they can't fault the learning packages and the training packages that are provided through organisations. The other piece, in terms of the Environment Agency, that empowerment we push further. So the network groups that we give people permission to take part in, whether that be LGBT+, whether it be mental health, whether it be well-being, or whatever it is, that's an important building block within the organisation to get feedback, to give people information and support packages.
Great, okay, thank you very much. So just picking up on that point, I just wondered, it'd be quite interesting, show of hands, how many of you as line managers, or if you're not, don't have direct reports, how many of you feel that your line manager actually is working on their instinctiveness and their intuition on a daily basis? So just put your hands up in regards to mental health. Okay, so just under about half of you. And then am I to assume then that the rest of you feel that your line managers are well skilled and well developed in mental health? Put your hands up if you think that's the case. Okay, so clearly significantly less than half. So just an interesting kind of just a pulse test of where we feel we are for those that we either manage ourselves or we're being managed by. And I think it's an interesting point, Jessica, that most of us all have a line manager, really. Okay, so moving back to this culture that we sort of touched on with you, Alison, and bringing that back to the work that you're doing at KPMG, Jessica. So it's well known that line managers play a significant role in our jobs and how we feel about that. That actually, if our relationship with our line manager is quite poor, that can add to workplace stress and anxiety. And so how do you go about at KPMG, or how does an organisation go about creating that consistency across all our line managers in different departments, different directives, who probably have very different looking day-to-days? How do we ensure that they all have the same consistency of message, skill and ability?
I think this is a big challenge. If I think about who's in the audience today, I think we've probably got the engaged, the people who want to make a difference and who are committed to doing that. I wonder where the unengaged are. I think the unengaged are somewhere else, and it'll be quite a struggle to get them along to a conference like this. But we're all up for the challenge, I hope, and thank you for everyone to come to an event like this and to take that challenge on. What we've done at KPMG is to try to do a number of things to tackle that. We have got our leaders committing to supporting mental health, and when I say leaders, I mean the ExCo and the board level leaders. But we've also got partners and directors, the next level down, speaking about mental health to their own teams. We need that because it has to be real. You need to have your leaders speaking in real terms. It can't be people who are too far away for it to be realistic. So we've got a program of role models that we are building on this year and rolling out across the business. To give you an example, one of our partners, who is the head of one of the departments, wrote to that department to tell them about mental health training, which we've just released, and to get the commitment of 2 other heads of department to do the same. That was much more tangible than having the head of the organisation send out one email and leaving it. We needed to cascade it down. So that's one of the things that we've done. And we keep those messages threading through the organisation. The second thing we've done is we've developed a mental health learning programme for colleagues and managers focused on what to do in the workplace. So this is not about mental health in general. It's not about mental health first aid, even though there is a place for those programs. This is about what do I do as a colleague? And there's actually a module on what do I do as a manager. And we focus on what is my duty of care. I need to notice what's going on around me. I need to notice when something is different. I need to ask. I need to speak about it. It is my duty to act. If I don't act, then I'm doing something wrong. I need to talk to my colleagues around me and notice. So we've done that. And we've related it to our code of conduct and what it is the duty of all of us to do at KPMG. And by doing that, we've got a very consistent message, because we all need to live our values and live our code of conduct every day. And that is something that we all accept as colleagues at KPMG. So it's very consistent. So those are two of the things that we've done. There are other things as well, but I think those, for me, are the key things that we're really working on. And then we're driving those messages consistently. You have to not give up. This is a change exercise, so we don't do it once and then we leave it.
Yeah.
We have to keep nudging that change to keep going consistently. This won't just happen once and we're done. We have to keep going. So there.
And I think that's great, that idea that we live our values every day, and that actually this is a journey, and all three of you, and I'm sure many of you here today, have got experience of that journey regardless of where you are on that journey in your organisation, whether you individually or business. So sticking with line managers, just hands up quickly, who's a line manager? Okay, right. Sticking with line managers. Anyone who is a line manager, do you ever feel that you're sort of pulled from above and pushed from below, or conversely, does that ever your experience? No, my goodness. I want your world. That's really good. Okay, so, well, working on the assumption that they are, or it's often the experience of line managers that they're the ones that are doing all the time, aren't they? So here's a new program for you. We're taking mental health seriously. We need you to be trained up. We need you to start taking this as part of your responsibility. There's board level and strategic needs, and there's operational needs that are coming up. How do we make sure that actually these individuals that we're putting so much commitment into and resource into actually are able to thrive and flourish themselves?
So I'm going to, I didn't warn Jaan I was going to do this, but I'm going to ask who's got a line manager? So most of us, and that I was just checking, so I was about to say something, making sure I wasn't going to be wrong. So for all types of organisation, the vast majority of us have got a line manager, as well as some of us being line managers. So picking up Jessica's point. And what we've done is make sure that no line manager is excluded from the training. So right up to our non-exec level, everyone has at least been trained to be mental health aware. And I think that is really important, that there isn't a certain level above which you're kind of excluded, because in the same way as mental ill health can affect anyone at any time, similarly mental health ignorance can affect anyone as well. So that's been really important to us. Then within the mental health first aid training, one of the things that was probably the biggest revelation to me, and I do feel a bit silly saying this, but I'm going to say it because I think other people will have thought this as well. It's very clear, the message about having to look after yourselves to be able to look after other people. And as a line manager, that message was just so important to me, and is so important in the way that we onwards communicate. So the MHFA training really helps us to focus on that. And then we're very fortunate, we do have support within the business. So we've now got a network of first aiders. We've got an employee assistance line, and we've seen brilliant increase in uptake. Now we've started to talk about it more. But actually, even if you're in an organisation that doesn't have that level of support, there are organisations that I'm now much more aware of, like the Samaritans, like the Mind helpline. So there is something there for everyone. It's just finding the right thing for your organisation.
Okay, thank you. Neil, we're going to jump back to you.
Okay.
So, Fred from finance, or whoever it might be, came into the business to be a finance officer. That's what they do. And certainly, I think back to some of my early line managers as well. They certainly were clear on the job that they were employed to do, but employee well-being, mental health specifically, was never seen as a part of that role for them unless they were specifically in HR or a similar kind of role. So there's probably going to be pushback, I would imagine, from some of our line managers and people managers when they start to understand that this is a direction the organisation's going in. How do we deal with that? Have you had experience at the agency?
Well, I think some of the things that I've done in terms of handling or managing that situation, the Environment Agent's got an underlying strategy that work is life enhancing, and the 5 steps to wellbeing sit nicely under that. And the things that I've done with my teams have been around sessions that explore Stephen Covey's Sharpening the Saw. So that's around time, space and choice, and using tools to self-reflect in terms of how people are feeling at that moment in time. I ran a trial project with my departments last year, which created a sharing environment, so they were rating their happiness, and they were able to share how they were feeling at that moment in time, which created a support network around that. So empowering people to take responsibility as well helps with that pushback. One of the citations in the nomination for the award that was put forward was around normalising the conversation, so removing the stigma. So I lead discussions around mental health, around well-being, around inclusivity. But as part of that, I've shared my experiences. So sharing my experiences of my dad's mental ill health when I was 19, the counselling process myself and my wife went through when we lost our first child an hour after he was born. And I've shared recently my brother's ongoing battle with cancer and how he's dealing with that mental health and mental headspace to manage that and support his family as well. So by sharing those experiences makes it okay for people to come and talk and create that open and trusting environment for others. So yes, it can be hard for line managers to grasp all that, but I think it's important to support. So spot the signs where they're struggling with it and ask the question, how can I help you to land this message, to provide a support network for you to enable you to lead your people better.
Okay, and if I may, so sort of building on that a little bit more, we hear quite a lot about the power of stories, don't you? And you just very kindly shared 3 examples there, very significant points in your life that had a significant impact. Do you think, as an organisation, that actually sharing personal stories does make a real difference? And if so, what can we do to support and encourage those that do that? Because I can imagine coming out and sharing your story on one of those situations is actually quite not beyond a nerve-wracking, but you're actually a very exposing thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's hugely powerful. You know, that message that it's okay to talk helps create the conversation, helps put the support network in place to help people to be the best they can be. We've got some fantastic people at the Environment Agency who do share their stories. They share it on a public stage, or they share it quietly, or they share it through social media. I think there are different ways that people can share, and just by putting it out there, it generates a supporting environment.
Okay, all right, thank you very much, thank you. So I'm just having a quick glance down here. There's lots of questions coming in on Slido, so we'll jump to those in a moment. So if you do have any more, please do like the ones that you can see or add your questions to it. One of the things that this can happen is very keen on, and I think we're all big supporters of, and I'm sure you all are here, is that actually everyone leaves with a key takeaway from the day. So we've had various points that are raised around organisational support networks, around supporting those individuals so they're clearly understanding their roles and reasons why, about having a strong, clear strategy. But I'd just like to take the opportunity before we go into the questions to just go across the panel. And if there's one thing that you would like this 200 odd people that have very kindly come and joined us for this conversation today to leave with, starting with you, Alison, what would that be?
So my one is to find externally accredited resources that work for you. So for me, bearing in mind I was in that position of extreme ignorance, I did a load of research, and for me those organisations were Time to Change and Mental Health First Aid, and there are 2 key organisations that we have worked with and are still working with. But actually the other thing that I've come across in the last few months that has been fantastic, and I'd really, really encourage you to look at, especially if you're early on in your journey, is mentalhealthatwork.org.uk. And that is the site that Mind and the Royal Foundation have developed. And if I had had that site 5 or 6 years ago, I would have been able to go quicker. And I want everyone to be able to go as fast as possible whilst kind of looking after themselves. And that's the site I'd love people to look at.
It's great, isn't it?
Really, really good.
Brilliant, thank you. Neil, what would your takeaway be?
I think my takeaway would be, I think everyone in the room earlier heard the policeman from York describe caring's important. I think that's the biggest thing for me. Caring and meaning what you're doing is so important. And I regularly hold check-ins with my direct reports and my wider teams. And probably the takeaway thing or what I use is a very simple but powerful question. How are you today?
Yeah.
And that forms the conversation that takes you into different places.
Yeah, and I love that. I think, and again, as you say, if it's about being truthful and caring, then that question carries so much power, doesn't it? Great, thank you. Jessica, how about yourself?
Yes, so actually, just before you get to Neil's, I think it's about noticing.
Right.
So noticing and then acting. We talked, or I heard earlier in the sessions about the fact that social media pervades our life, and the digital 24/7 culture means we're on all the time. But if you think about the types of offices that many of us work in, we constantly live in worlds where you're living in an open plan environment and you're constantly on display. And that can mean, as a line manager, that unless you're modeling real behaviors of perhaps I don't always feel great, or my manager always seems to be having a great day, and perhaps I feel a bit lonely and I can't necessarily say if I don't feel well. So please, as a line manager, look around you and see what your colleagues are feeling. They may not always be acting quite the same. Does that mean that you need to check in with them and ask them how they are? Please notice that. Notice that, because maybe there are some lonely people that you're working with who feel that they can't speak out, and they're waiting for an opportunity to do so, which you can help them do by noticing what's going on around you.
Great, thank you. So we've got time for a quick couple of Slido questions. So let's see what we're coming up here. Top one, 36 of you have agreed that this is important. So how do you support employee well-being as a line manager while also managing performance issues as a result of mental ill health? Interesting question. Anyone particularly jump out at that?
I'm
Go for it.
Have a go at that one. So one of the things that I'm really passionate about, and I was passionate about before, but now I understand why I am passionate about it, is having that consistency of actually making sure we are managing performance when it's good, not just when it's bad. I'm not sure if that's maybe what was meant in the second part of that question. So having those conversations, having one-to-ones, having regular reviews, setting objectives, those kind of things. So if that's the norm consistently across the business, then that performance management shouldn't just be a thing for when it's bad. And the other bit is, back to my externally accredited resources, Mind have a brilliant thing called a wellness action plan, which I use with my team. I haven't got it rolled out across the organisation yet, but I use with my team, and it's really thought-provoking. It's only about maybe 5 or 6 questions, but really thought-provoking questions to help us to think about what we need to look after ourselves and what we need from our line managers to look after us.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Neil.
Just to add to that, I think if I'm not managing or supporting someone with mental health issues, I'm not doing my job.
Yeah.
So it's a performance issue for me that I'm not doing the job I'm meant to be doing.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Have any of you got any thoughts on bringing that in as a performance indicator within our organisations as well? We were talking about happiness index earlier, and we talked about well-being data as well. Do you think that's something that should be brought in so that we can start to hold that against our line managers' performance indicators?
Yes, we just refreshed our performance manager principles and key performance indicators, which I also saw flash up on the screen down here. And yes, so now part of the stated performance indicators of a performance manager is about how you manage well-being as well. So we can build that into our goals, but it's there. We have to do it. Every single person has to do it as a line manager. So if it was perhaps implied in some way before, it's certainly not implied
certainly there
anymore.
now.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Let's pick up one more question quickly. Let's pick up this one here. How do we engage the disengaged population who may be needing this the most? Anyone got any thoughts on that? I know, Neil, you sort of touched on that earlier, but
I think telling the stories, creating the awareness. As a leader across our organisation, then it's important to be seen and felt and appreciated in terms of the things that you're doing. And I think that has impact and generates a bit of momentum. So I've heard the word momentum used a lot today, and this first event, and it's a platform to build on.
Yeah, certainly.
So I would say, what does engage those people, and how can you use what engages them to engage them about this? So one of the things we did this year at KPMG was we invited one of the chairmen of our client to come and talk about his experience with mental health. And because he was a big client of ours, we were able to get a number of partners who might otherwise not have come to the event to come. And another thing we did is we invited a famous sports person to come and talk about his mental health. And we got 150 people who otherwise had never been to one of our events before, and they came along. And events are very powerful because they neutralize the conversation around mental health. And you could be at that event and have nothing to do with mental health yourself. You're just coming perhaps because you are a line manager. So there's no stigma attached to that. People feel very comfortable in that environment, and then you can get those messages across. So challenge yourself to think about how you can be creative around this, and that's how you can get those messages in there.
Fantastic, thank you. I think that's a really good message to end on. So, accredited external resources that are out there, and I would expand on that and say actually learn from other organisations where we may find ourselves commercially competitive on this agenda point. My experience, and I'm sure others, has always been that organisations are very willing to share their best practice and possibly some of the rabbit holes they've gone down.
Sorry, just to add one more thing. The line manager resource that is free to download on Mental Health First Aid's website would answer some of those other questions that we haven't had time to get to.
Yeah.
But it's a free resource, so that's a great one to use as well.
Asking questions and being sincere, and a really powerful question is, how are you today? And the step, as you were saying before that, Jessica, about noticing and noticing change as well. I hope you found this interesting and helpful. Please do carry on the conversation online and with these three as well. And I'd just like to ask you to join me in saying thank you very much.